There it is. All right, and can you still see my screen?
I can.
All right,
Hello,
perfect.
everyone. Are you able to see the screen and hear the presentation now? Great. All right, Craig, looks like you're live.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. So good afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about jurisdiction that we've been working with for the past few years around improving their overall process or their permitting program. And so we're going to talk through some of the lessons learned and different case studies related to what we've learned over the past 4 years. So just a little bit about me and our organization. My name is Craig Starcher. We may have met at some of the past MGO conferences, whether here in Texas or in New Orleans. But I work with a team, Frontline Advisory Group, leading the community development practice. And so our organization supports jurisdictions all over the country, but our practice primarily focuses on program audits, platform migrations, configuring MGO, process mapping and improvement, training development, data analysis dashboards, really anything that you can think of related to the development process. So permitting, planning, and enforcement, even like road maintenance and things like that. And we're also one of the first preferred partners with MGO based on the work that we're doing with the dashboard and reporting space, and then also just our unique experience with the platform itself and how to configure in a way that really supports overall operations. And so before we leave today, my hope is that you walk away with a few lessons. And so one of those is being able to identify common operational bottlenecks and seeing some of the bottlenecks that we identified and seeing if those really resonate with you. Evaluating meaningful performance metrics. We're going to talk through a 4-step framework for doing process improvement and then identify opportunities for standardization and automation. And then overall, use the operational data to make better management decisions. And so the challenge, this was the challenge for this jurisdiction, but honestly, I imagine 100% of the people in this room can relate to at least one, if not every single one of these. When we started, there was staffing and budgetary constraints. There's a growing workload and a growing demand for more transparency and communication from the public. There's limited performance visibility. MGO is a wealth of data, but being able to access those data, that data was kind of an unknown for our team. There's inconsistent processes, especially if you're talking about between different departments. And then there's just outdated tools and communication methods. And so for context, when we came in, they were one of MGO's first clients in Texas, but they really hadn't updated the platform as Ryan and his team had implemented new features and things like that. And so the platform was, in all actuality, over 12 years old. And so you'll see, some of those that maybe y'all didn't even realize that it was different than what you're seeing now. But we had to really modernize it while we're implementing all the things that we're talking about today. All right, so that 4-step process improvement framework. Step 1, focus the work. Step 2 is setting a foundation. 3 is improving the processes. And then 4, capitalizing on automation. In a perfect world, this is the flow that you would want to go to. And so the way that I think about it is focusing the work is like cleaning the house. Like say we're having to build a new house, or renovate a house, like I want to clean it out, make sure I see all the imperfections, good, bad, everything. And so that then we can focus on what needs to be repaired. Then I want to set a foundation. So I'm filling in the cracks, things like that. So when we build on top of it, we have something strong supporting everything. And then the actual build is those process improvement measures. So now that you have access to data and things like that, like you can really make data-driven decisions to improve your overall performance. And then once you have good processes, and only once you have good processes, implementing automation to scale those processes for you and scale the people on your team. All right, so step 1, focusing on the work. So the key lesson here is really removing the clutter from the workspace and your team's workload. And so the actions that we took, we archived inactive projects and applications. We removed obsolete data fields, like you see in the bottom right corner. This is probably a screen that's more familiar with you. The various project tabs, they might be called variable tabs that you're familiar with. When we started, we didn't have this. Each one of these tabs was its own module on the space. And so our project page took forever to scroll through and really find what you were looking for. We organized information into a logical structure. So we took those modules, cleaned out the things that we weren't using anymore, the things that hadn't been used in over a year that we thought that maybe we would have needed, and we organized them into these tabs. And then we reduced duplicate systems. And so they had processes that weren't necessarily built into MGO, even though they were part of the overall development program. And what that ended up causing them to do was like they couldn't process payments for those services. So they had to use other systems like QuickBooks. And so then they had MGO, they had QuickBooks, they had their other accounting software. And so that just created so much redundancy, complexity. People were having to learn new software, they're having to pay for that software. And every time you're switching data between the different platforms, you're creating opportunities to do something wrong. And especially when it comes to finance like that, you definitely don't want that. So as a result of these actions, we voided out over 12,000 inactive applications and projects. And this was after multiple notifications to let them know that this was going to be happening. This is a relatively long process, so nobody was surprised. But when we say voided out, we mean if you really want to do this project still, and you didn't take action all those times that we notified you before, you're gonna have to submit a whole new application and pay again. And we were able to really do this with confidence because they had already written this into their development code that a year of inactivity would potentially lead to them voiding out their project and having to start again. So having that in the code was really helpful for us. And then we fully automated that. So that continues to happen today, but the staff's never have been to pull reports on it. Those projects are immediately being removed from their work queues and things like that. And so the system is now working for us and really removing that clutter for us and making sure it stays clean. And then we really focus the staff's workspace. So like I said, taking those modules, putting them in the checklist variables, we're able to just make the overall project page that they're normally working with easier to use, easier to find what they're looking for. And so this is one of the things I'm most excited about with MGO Connect. Ryan's team has really taken this to the next level. And for those of you that are using it or have been testing with it, and on the right side of the screen, you can see each of the modules that are present on that page, but you have the ability to click the eye next to it to either hide it or unhide it. And so I was talking to a team yesterday that that works in the public works space. And they're like, well, our teams in the fabrication shop, they're not really going to be needing like address locations and stuff like that. And so with those teams, we can hide those modules, and then the teams are actually installing those signs for them. We can unhide those modules. So that customization really makes the workspace work most effectively for their specific operations. All right, step two, we clean the house. Now we're setting the foundation. And so one of the key lessons here is that just having data does not improve performance, but being able to turn that data into usable information so that we can make better decisions is what improves performance. And so this strong foundation is built on three things. Improved communication. 9 times out of 10, if you can just improve the communication between your teams and with the constituents or the applicants, that's going to overall improve. If it doesn't improve the performance itself, it's going to improve the perception of their experience in that process, which is then going to improve their experience, which is almost more important. And we can talk, I can give you an example of why that is here shortly. And then data, so being able to collect and have access to the wealth of data that's available in MGO, and even areas that aren't in MGO. So for example, we removed the permit desk's email address from the website, and instead we replaced it with a form. They're using JotForm. I imagine everybody here is using Microsoft, so you could replace it with a Microsoft form, things like that. And so what that form does is, one, based off the request, it automatically sends it to the person that is most geared to respond to that. So if they have a question about, hey, your website's not working correctly, that immediately goes to the web team, never even enters the permit decks queue. Hey, I have an escalation request because I want something's not happening, and I feel like it should be. I need this to go to management or something like that. Well, now when they submit that, everyone within the management chain of command gets a notification of it. They can see, ensure that action's being taken on it, or it does go to the permit desk. But even more important than that is that it all gets captured in a spreadsheet, and we can then analyze that spreadsheet. We can run it through AI, things like that, to be able to, for example, we ran the entire project comments report out of MGO and the permit desk database that we had created through AI, and collected the most frequently asked questions and common trends that we were seeing. And then we use that data to develop an open house series over the past year based off different topics. So we could train the public, which then helped us get better quality stuff from them, help them feel more comfortable in the overall application process, and made it to where we were being proactive in improving our processes instead of reactive. So collecting that data, and then also turning that data into usable information. And so that's reports, which we'll look at here shortly. That's dashboards so that you can understand the reports, because reports can be pretty complex. And so just putting that in a way that people feel confident in to make decisions off of it. And so some examples of these different things, we already talked about how we're pulling communication data from from MGO. One of those is the reason we're able to do that is we developed a standard for communication, both internal and external, so the team knows when they're supposed to use what type of communication tool within MGO. So now all of the data is all the communication is being captured within the project. It's not being captured in someone's email. So when we have turnover, we're not losing that history. Say, it's a holiday and we get a call from an elected official and we need to give them a response. It's like, well, now the leadership on the team knows where to go inside the project to find all the information that they need without having to track down all the reviewers associated with it. So it just makes everything feel more seamless. We made updates to the webpage that we'll talk about a little bit more here. But we developed web pages that were process focused from the customer's perspective, which is probably the most important thing to take away. Is we should be communicating the way that they're perceiving the overall process, not the way that we are perceiving the process. And this was, we migrated over to the new MGO customer portal. Now, this was when they had first come out with it. So honestly, if you're not on the new MGO customer portal, the transition is pretty easy. They can migrate you over so fast, and the functionality that's available in the newer customer portal is so much more intuitive, and we have so much more flexibility. That was probably one of the biggest things we were able to do to improve the overall communication and experience for the customer, because that also gave us the ability to have those conversations within the portal using the project comments tool. Now for data, we created meaningful project and requirement statuses, which I'll go into more detail on the next slide. We started tracking performance. So not to like feel like we're big brother over the staff, but more to be able to identify opportunities for improvement, or maybe opportunities for individual training or resources for specific people and teams. And so it became one of the most helpful leadership management tools available for us, because we could make decisions around training and resourcing that was supported by data. And then capturing information into the variable checklist. So being able to pull data that applicants put in their application, we're able to take that and put it into the checklist. You may ask why. Like, the data already exists. Like, you can pull reports off of it without it being there. But I imagine everybody knows that sometimes the applicant doesn't know what the right thing that went into that checklist, or they had a typo or something like that, or in that application. And so we need to go back and fix it. And so putting those types of variables in the checklist so that we can fix them as we're going through the review was extremely helpful, because now when we pull reports, the data is more accurate. And then for reporting, really you should be thinking about it from 3 perspectives. And so we've developed 9 reports that we think are core to any organization effectively monitoring and working on their program should have. And they follow these 3 principles. One is an overview. So think of it as a balance sheet. It's a snapshot in time of the overall health of your team, your organization, things like that. Performance. So those activities of when things are changing from one status to another. And then communication. That can be when documents are being uploaded, when we're talking to people through the project comments, when we're using the notes function, like any of those communication type tools. And then dashboards. They don't always have to be super fancy dashboards, right? So we have 2 that we use regularly. We have a weekly status report. We pull 11 separate reports. We pull it into an Excel, Google Sheet based product that we have custom designed for each review team. Those reviewers can go and interact with it, click on the pivot tables, pull the raw data, do more research, things like that. They're far more interactive for the review and staff level, and easy to manipulate and to maintain by the staff. Then we have the other interactive dashboards through like Power BI. These are much more robust, great for leadership, great for the community, things like that. And if you want to make this data public, both of them serve very different purposes, but are really important for effective decision making. All right, so we talked about communication. On the left here, you can see a small screenshot of the web pages. So you can see each of the tiles are for something different: a single family home, an accessory building, an addition. From our perspective, every single one of those is a development permit. All they have to do is apply for a development permit, right? But to a constituent, that might not be the way that they think about it. The way that they think about it is, hey, I need to do this renovation. I've never done this before. Like, how do I do it, right? And so now we are speaking the language that we're in the frame of mind that they are in. And they click on it. All 4 of these are going to tell them to go to MGO and click on the development permit, but it's walking them through that step by step in a way that is intuitive for them. These pages tell them what documents to be ready to bring to their application, what information they should have ready before they start their application, where to submit the application, where to check the statuses, and then what they can expect from us and what we expect from them throughout the entire process. So everybody's on the same page and we all have an understanding. I think the most interesting thing I've heard after we published this, we literally had a constituent call back to tell us how much she loved our website, which I was like, as a software developer working in finance and federal government, I've never ever had someone call to compliment how well something worked for us. And so that was, to me, a great indicator that this was working in the way that we had intended for it to. Now on the right side, these are the MGO tools. So the top right, you should be familiar with. This is the projects or dashboard section of the MGO customer portal, which is, for me, I think highly intuitive. It has so much information available to the customer, so much functionality, whether it's paying bills or uploading documents, all in one place for them. And then it gives them the visual representations that make it easier for them to really understand where they're at if action needs to be taken, as long as you're using effective statuses and whatnot, which we'll talk about next. And then in the bottom is the project comments tool, being able to have threads and upload documents, upload pictures, anything you need to, and have a conversation back and forth between the team and with the public was so helpful. And then we developed reports that pulled all those conversations, right? And so now we can see trends and things like that. And it also helped that, we talked about at the beginning, focusing effort. Now our staff can just turn off the system notifications. They don't need to get notified every time a comment comes in. They don't need to be notified every time something enters their queue, because they can pull a report, make it part of their daily routine to just check all of them at the same time, based off of a report. And it just makes it easier for them because they're not jumping from Outlook back to MGO, back to whatever they're reviewing, because every time they're switching platforms, it means that they're not focusing, right? And they're now having to switch their focus, switch what they're thinking about, and it's constantly interrupting them instead of allowing them to just finish their review and the thing that's most important for them. All right, setting foundation from a data perspective. This is about creating opportunities to create more data in MGO as well, right? So project statuses are a great example of this. A couple that we've noticed with that is not common practice across all jurisdictions, which really should be, is a pre-review, some sort of pre-review status. That means, hey, we have your application, we're working on it, we're working to prepare it to invoice you and get the review started, right? So they know that y'all are in that preparation phase, unpaid. They should know that, hey, the review's not going to start until you've paid your balance, and there's not a zero balance on this project. The other helpful thing is when it's unpaid, it means it's not in our staff's queue, so they're not having to filter it out or anything like that. It's not there, which is great. And you create automation around it moving through that payment process. So it doesn't even enter their queue until it reaches a zero balance. And void, like I talked about earlier, setting up automation that voids out inactive projects for you. Now on the right side, you see the requirement statuses. These are much more traditional: to do, waiting on applicant, completed. The one that we don't often see that might be the most important is the in progress status. And the reason for that is that in progress, one, communicates to the applicant that the work has started. If it just sits in to do, which we often see, then they have no idea. To them, they might be thinking, hey, did someone forget that my project's in their queue? Like no one started working on it yet, anything like that. And so being able to give them an in progress status of like, I am actively working on it, is reassuring to them, cuts down on some of the calls for status updates. Now, from a decision-making perspective and performance tracking perspective, it's even more important because whenever something's put into do, that means it's entered our queue, but we haven't been able to touch it. So in process improvement, that's called waste. It means that it's piling up and no one's able to start to add value to the product to get it to the finish line. And so once it switches to in progress, that's when the value gets to be added to the product, right? And so we want to be able to capture that time it's in to do to in progress, because if that continues to climb, and then that might be an indicator that you don't have enough staff or resources on your team to effectively get to reviews in a timely manner, especially if the in progress to completed or in progress to waiting on applicant time is really short. So that shows that the review doesn't take that long. It's just there's so many in there that they can't get to it. And so that's a really important decision-making indicator. And then the other is that you can't, without that, you can't really tell us how long it takes to complete a review. You can tell us how long it took you to get to it and finish it, but you're not able to say like how long it took for me to start and then actually do the work. So those are really important. There's one since then that we've also added called hold, because in progress means we're actively working on it. Waiting on applicant means that we've sent it back to you. We can't do anything until you give us something back. Hold means that neither of us can do anything because we're waiting on a third party like agency or something like that to get us something back, whether like FEMA or something like that. And neither us or the applicant can do anything to move this forward. And so that hold status has also been really valuable for us to improve communication, and just gives us another data point, because we can then see how long does stuff sit and hold with FEMA, for example, and is there a way for us to be more proactive so that we can cut that time down in the overall review and permitting process? All right, now converting all that data into information, reports and dashboards. So like I said, we've developed 9 reports. I know that it's impossible to read it right here, and that's kind of intentional to show you that these reports are extremely robust. They have a ton of information, but you can't just put them all on one. So for example, I'll sometimes get a request for the everything report, right? And that's because they want to be able to see a complete picture of a project or what's in their queue. But in reality, if I'm looking at the project level details, those are different from the tasks that are in the workflow, right? Those aren't a one for one. So I need a report for projects, I need a report for tasks, then I need a separate report that shows the activity of every time that that task is being changed. And so we use all 9 of those reports in a really harmonious way to give us a clear picture. And then we're able to take those 9 reports and develop dashboards like you see here. And these can tell us, how long is it taking for staff to start a project? How many rounds of comments do staff members often have? And so, if that average round of comments is above average compared to the rest of the team, that might be an indicator that you need to work on communication, writing skills or something like that with that person. Or maybe they're just rushing through their reviews, and you need to just help them to slow down, make sure that they're giving a quality, explain to them like the reason for sending out quality comments that are really clear and easily understood. Or if you see someone's doing 10 times more reviews than everybody else on the team, it's like, I really need to learn what this person's doing so I can train the rest of our team on that. Those types of things are really important, and you really only can capture those after you've created some sort of visualization on that performance data. All right, so some of the key things that I recommend every jurisdiction to be monitoring, your overall queue size, and we track this on a week-by-week basis so that I can compare how has the queue changed in fourth quarter compared to first quarter. The review completion times, so how long did it take to set it to a waiting on applicant or completed? The count of how long it took to get to a completed status. So regardless of how many rounds of comments that took, when we first got it in to getting it completed and out the door, how long did that take? Days to set reviews days set reviews completed, how many we did complete in a given time period, count of review cycles before it was approved, and then customer communication volume. So to explain why these are important, one of the things that we noticed was that we were able to improve the review time tremendously. Like I think over 140% with some teams, right? And so they were able to get their stuff back to the applicant or completed, twice as fast as when they started, or 2/3 as fast, which we'll show here in another slide. But then when we looked at how long it was taking to get to an overall completed status and a permit issued, we realized that the time was actually taking longer. The communication volume was up higher than it's ever been. And the number of complaints that we were getting from elected officials or permit desk was actually down. And so we realized that the reason that we weren't getting complaints, even though our review times were taking longer, is that our communication had improved so much that they felt like they understood where they're in the process. They just felt more confident, and there's less uncertainty in the overall process. And so that showed us how important the communication piece was. But it also showed us that, hey, we need to figure out why the review process are so fast, but the overall time to complete is a little bit slower. And so for us as a management team, then we're able to start looking at the quality of our comments. Do we need to join comments together, do complete letters, or split them up? Or we were able to have an indicator that showed us where we need to dive a little bit deeper to improve, and support our team. So all of these are extremely important by themselves, but once you can merge them together, way more important and helpful for management decisions. All right, so a few case studies reiterating on things that we've talked about. Communication improvement. So the challenge that they were experiencing during this was applicants were struggling to find the information that they needed. Staff was receiving incomplete or just poorly crafted applications, and internal communication lacked consistency. So people were tracking stuff down in their email. They were losing track of conversations they had with someone, 6 months ago, things like that. The solution was updating and redesigning the web page. So it followed a process that aligned with the customer's perspective, improving communication practices and tools. That was adding those statuses, using the project comment tool so it's integrated with the system, things like that. And providing standards around how you're using those and when, and then structuring the intake process. So we're guiding them to give us the application questions and documents that really were needed for us to do an effective review the first time. And so as a result, we had far fewer misunderstandings, higher quality of applications, which allowed us to review everything a lot faster, much more improved transparency in the overall process of the application, and increased transparency throughout that process, right? But I would say the most important result that we had was when we presented to the commissioners. The commissioners had forgotten about us because they're like, we don't receive phone calls anymore about you, right? And so our contract started because the commissioners were receiving so many phone calls that they were like, you just need to do something to fix this and to improve your processes, without really understanding why that was happening. And now we're at the point that they are receiving no phone calls whatsoever, because applicants are so much more confident with what's going on throughout the process. All right, so the next one is data invisibility. So the challenge that they had, they didn't understand their overall work queues. If we asked how many permits were being issued a year, it was something that they had to go do research, and it would take a couple days for them to get a number back for us, right? And now we can pull in seconds. Then the project statuses, there was inconsistencies because it was all manual. So a lot of times you'd find stuff that, it's worked its way through a process and someone forgot to switch a status over. They couldn't really identify where the bottlenecks were other than how they felt, right? Team was getting burnt out, excessive workload, and they really had no visibility of what the performance trends were. They just knew that things were moving slower than they wanted them to. So as a result, decisions were often anecdotal and really feelings or gut based, right? They didn't have a way to base those off operational data. Not saying the decisions they were making were wrong, but at least now we can tell a story that's supported by data to support that. And so the solution, standardizing the project and requirement statuses, that allowed us to also develop automation around those. So those statuses automatically change as we work through, at least on the project level, as we work through the workflow. So now it's rarely, if ever, in the wrong status because it's all automated. We've removed the human element out of it. Activity training or tracking, project level reports to get a good picture of the overall program. And then those team dashboards I told you about, that now the staff can go in and see all the communication that they received that week, how their queues changed over the last 20 weeks if they wanted to, how their performance last week compares to the past 10 weeks. What is coming up in their queue, what may be late and they really need to focus on, and just help them to focus our efforts on the things that were most important and to make sure things weren't slipping through the cracks. And so it really transformed this raw data into actionable operational information. And so as a result, the engineering team alone, their queue dropped from 168 in first quarter on average to 49 a week in fourth quarter. So by over 2/3. The floodplain reviews, similarly in first quarter, were at 44. By fourth quarter, on average, they only had 17 in their queue. And then managers were able to then start more effectively making decisions around their workload, bottlenecks, training, and performance. Yeah. All right, so we've talked about cleaning the house, setting the foundation. Now to actually to improve the processes. So one of the things that I want us to take away is that you can't improve a process unless you fully understand the process. So before changing a workflow, the organization should identify how it currently works, where delays, decisions, and activities are within that workflow, and then deciding what is the ideal workflow. And so when they can compare the ideal desired workflow to where it currently is, they can do what we call a gap analysis and see, do I need more people? Do I need more technology? Do I need to change configurations in the system to get from where we currently are to where we want to be? Because then that gives you some actionable things that you can do to get from point A to point B. The other thing is that I would say 80 or 90% of the time, Just mapping out the process alone helps leadership identify where there's misunderstandings of what the process is supposed to be among their teams. And just mapping out the current state process, I would say 8 or 9 times out of time, was an improvement to the overall process alone because they were able to train their staff on what they were supposed to be doing. So some actions. Mapping the key permits and review workflows, or key permitting and review workflows. We say to do that at 80%, right? So this workflow should meet 80% of the need that they have in this situation. As we all know, like every project is a little bit different, may need a little bit something different. But if we tried to develop workflows that met 100% of those, we would just have too many for them to choose from. And so it kind of would violate, the first principle that we talked about of focusing their work. But it gives them enough structure that they can easily update it, customize it to the uniqueness of that project without having to rebuild a workflow every single time they get an application. And then improving the application questions and required documents to ensure that you're getting the best information, the most accurate information the first time, so that you can actually, your first review is creating real value and is not just sending them another list of things that you need before you can really start. So this, here's the two things that we did to do this. So on the left, you can see the process map I described. So very detailed, hitting every single task that's being done throughout the process. We have it color coded by the person that's responsible for that task, whether it's internal or the applicant. And then the diamonds are every decision that had to be made throughout the process as well. So this allows you to see if there's like duplicate efforts. Are we making the same decision too many times? Things like that, and just creates a visual representation of the process. Kind of like we said earlier, in order for you to effectively make decisions on data, like you need a visualization of that data. The same principle applies here. And on the right side, this was something that we used to update all of the applications for both the documents and the questions we have in the applications. What we did on the left column was put the question, and along the top row, we put every single application, and we identified, do we need this during the application, or do we need to ask this question during the review comments later on, because they might not have that information when they first submit their application. And do we always need it, or do we just sometimes need it because, it's based off a nuance with the project. And so that helped us to refine our list of questions to only what was absolutely needed, and also told us what was required and what wasn't required, as in like, do we have the red asterisks or not? And it helped us to identify and see everything again on one page to see if, hey, we're often asking this for the driveway permit, but now that I think about it, it's helpful for the development permit as well, and we should be asking over here too. And so that happened a lot when we went through this exercise, but it gave us a product that we could reference back and remove duplicate questions out of the admin tool, which is really helpful for cleaning up and making edits. Like you don't want the same question, but a different one built into the admin tool for every application, because now if you need to update that question, you have to update it in 10 different places, right? So we were able to cut things out like that as well. So it helped both the reviewers and the admin team as well. All right, so results of the process improvement. We improved consistency, time spent creating the workflows just by creating that 80% solution for them. We cut down on a lot of the variability because the other thing is, like, if someone's having to recreate it and they forget to put a step in, things like that, you kind of lose the control and quality of that overall process. We improved the quality of our applications because we were able to better guide them to what questions or what information we need, what documentation we need, gave them descriptions of both so that they didn't have to guess what we were asking for, especially when it came to the documents, like what does this document really need to contain? And so that improved our overall review speed, like we talked about. Review speed for engineering team increased by 19% within the first year, the environmental team by 45%, and the floodplain team by 53%, all within the first year. and then reduced the queue size for the engineers by almost 245% and the floodplain by 152. So one thing you notice that there's a negative number here for environmental. So it's like, well, did it really like make the process worse for them? And the answer is no. What it did was the fact that we were able to track the performance data, we uncovered a risk that we didn't know about as an organization. So for context, the environmental team is one person who is just a beast, like can run through all the reviews on his own. He doesn't need multiple reviewers to be able to manage that workload. So his area was the one that needed the least amount of support. However, during Thanksgiving, right, because like I was saying, this is comparing first quarter numbers to fourth quarter. He got COVID during Thanksgiving and was out for 2 weeks, and the workload just kept piling up because he's the only person doing the reviews. They didn't have someone to back him up. And so when we went to run the numbers, his work queue numbers looked horrible. It looked like he was on far worse after all the improvements we had made. And we realized that we needed some mechanism in place to mitigate that risk of when he wants to go on vacation, if he gets sick and needs to take time off, things like that. So he's able to do all the reviews on his own. We didn't need another staff member. That would have been irresponsible, like expense for us, right? But we were able to contract out a third-party reviewer so that if there's a surge or he needs to take time off, like we can have that third party step in his place and just pay them for that time, not for a full FTE. And so being able to see this uncovered this risk for us, and we were able to make a management decision to mitigate this risk over time. All right, and then automating the routine tasks. And so we have great processes now, process that we've tested, we reviewed with the full team, we're confident in. Now it's time to introduce automation. So automation is most effective when it's applied to tasks that are repetitive, rule-based, and performed at a high volume. So if it meets, it's repetitive and rule-based, but you only do it once a year, you may actually spend more time developing the automation than actually the automation performing anything. So something to think about. And organizations should standardize their processes before they automate them, because if you have a poor process, the automation is just going to accelerate that inefficiency. It's going to make the problem worse faster, right? And so the actions that we took, we identified those routine tasks and we introduced automation around form letter generation, especially when it came to invoices, permits, notifications to the public, notifications to internal staff based off to when certain things happened, even drafting partial documents like a stop work order that the staff could print off and bring out to the field to finish filling out when they're on site. Any of those things when it comes to documentation was automated. Payment verification. Earlier I said it stays in the unpaid status and never enters their queue until payment verification has been done. And so the system is just constantly looking for a zero balance. And once it hits it, then it'll let it enter the queue. But now those projects are never even touching our staff's queue, so they're not cluttering it up. And so I constantly think of in the past, they would have to look through those inactive projects and stuff that was still unpaid and they couldn't start the review yet. And so sometimes their next project they could work on was buried on like page 3 or 4 of their work queue. And I don't know about you, but I rarely go to page 3 or 4 of Google. And so, the same principle kind of applies here as well, right? Permit issuance. So once we hit the phase where the permit can be issued out, that document's automatically generated, automatically sent to both the applicant and the owner. We even built in mechanisms that during the review process, they could add custom language to that permit based in the system. And so we even have like fully customized permits that will go out based off the nuances of that project, and it's still automated. We started pulling in GIS information. Our GIS team has a wealth of data. They're pulling from a variety of different sources. And so being able to pull data from our GIS system into the project based off of its location, what precinct it's in, is it in a floodplain, is it in an endangered species zone? Like all of those things are now being automatically pulled in to the project. So we have a more comprehensive review and the reviewers not having to go find those. We can even build automation around, data that is being pulled in from the GIS. We do it for advanced calculations. So one example is our tree mitigation formula is so complex. There's 5 or 6 different variables. So what we did was we took a variable tab, checklist tab, and we added those variables into it. So once they enter them in and hit that it's complete, it generates a form letter that does all the calculation for them. So unless they entered in one of the raw data points, like the size of the acreage or something like that, the system is doing all the math for them. So it really cuts down on the opportunity for error. And then the staff just have to copy and paste that staff or that total amount that the form letter gave them into the fee section. And then we updated, like I said, automated the status updates for the project and the void and expiration notifications and updates. As a result, we have more than 4,000 invoices and 4,000 permits that are created each year that staff didn't have to touch. And that results in about just under $100,000 in savings through saved staff time so that they can focus on other things that really require their attention or their interaction or deeper thinking or deeper review, right? We have 0 payment tracking that's needed. It's all being done by MGO. We have 0 project statuses that need to be updated. In the past 2 years, the system voided out 355 more projects for us after that initial 22,000 plus, or I think it was 12,000 plus. And so the staff's time is really being redirected towards customer service and the things that only they can do. All right, so lessons for other jurisdictions. So there's the value of visibility for your staff and applicants, visibility and where they're at in the process, making sure it's understood by both of them and really designed in a way that speaks to the customer who may be less technical, less experienced in the development space, right? Better intake processes lead to faster reviews. Higher quality stuff that's coming in leads to higher quality service and faster service. By standardizing things, you're creating structure to remove human error, but also enable automation, the ability to add automation to that process. Technology amplifies good processes and bad processes. So make sure that we're using it in a way to amplify just the good and to actually mitigate the bad. And operational improvements is a people and process and information project, not just a software project, right? Software is a part of or the tool used for it, but there's so much that goes into actually designing the operations around the software or designing the software to support those operations that really make the overall impact. All right, so that's everything I have for today, but I did want to open up just see if anybody had any questions. I know that we can submit questions in the chat. I'm not sure if people were able to come off mic, but I guess before we start that, Ryan, did you have anything that you wanted to talk about?
Sure. I've been taking a list of questions and kind of helping engage. So I thought we'd start with that list, and then I think I can turn off the mic and we can open it up as well. So, Craig, fantastic information. Just to reiterate what you're saying, software is always evolving. It's never static. You've never just arrived and you can coast. There's always going to be things of looking at processes. And one of the things we've really seen with all of the AI projects is how important data is and also the context of the data. If you're paying attention on LinkedIn, you'll see lots of articles where people who've been early adopter of AI projects may not have had a lot of success. And it's not the AI technology. When they do the postmortems, it's called coming back to poor data. So before you can use these really exciting new tools, you have to address the data. You have to have good workflows. You have to have good architecture and context, and then that drives the success to get to the next level. All things that Craig is talking about here. So also not to go to too much of a commercial before we get to the questions. I just want to reiterate, we have our national conference in December 9th, 10th, and 11th. Craig will be there teaching additional classes like this. He'll be there, I believe, the whole time. So you have a lot of opportunity to get with him one-on-one and ask questions at no charge. Craig works for Frontline, so their services cost money. But if you come to the conference, you steal as much of his time as you want at no cost. So it's a great opportunity. So Craig, a few of the questions I didn't answer because I wanted them to hear from you. I'll just pitch those out and you can speak to them. So someone had asked for Travis County, if there are multiple rounds of comments, how do you capture this and how are y'all handling that there at Travis County?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to jump back a couple slides here for you. And so it's these little numbers right here next to the status. So because we have a standard flow, to do goes to in progress goes to either hold, waiting on applicant, or completed, we're able to see that every time that your to do, right, number changes, that's the round of comments that you're on. So in this case, whatever requirement this is, it's on its 5th round of comments. In progress, this one's on the 4th round of comments. That doesn't always apply for waiting on applicant or completed. It just means that we've sent it to the applicant twice. But when you're looking at in progress and to do, that number right there is telling you what round of comments you're on. So we can capture that and we'll look at it once it's set to a completed status. So we see how many times did it take to get to that completed status.
Yeah, if you were at the conference last year, if you remember, we had that putting it all together a presentation where we were all up on stage, and it really illustrates that in a lot of depth, where it comes in, it goes back, and it comes in again. And we'll have that presentation again at this year's conference as well, where we really take time illustrating exactly all the tools that put together to handle those rounds. All right, next question. Craig, it was asked, will these reports be set as standard templates in our custom reports? And how can I implement these in our jurisdiction? And I know you're using a mix, some things that we have that are custom. I think some of those actually became some standard reports. And then I know that Frontline has developed some of your own reports. So can you speak to your experience of the different options and what's available?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think MGO has a great, it's under the general, I think that now in MGO Connect is called jurisdiction, but general reports that everybody has access to. Those are really helpful to see your workflows, your applications, audit your users, make sure that you don't have a bunch of inactive users in there. And so, but then we have the custom reports that we've created. So we've created 9 of them. Those are looking at application statuses and activities. So the overview and the performance, like I said, project details, and then tasks. So requirement, statuses, and activities. And we're looking at work orders. So all the work order statuses. And then we have the 3 communication ones. So project comments, banner notes, and file uploads. So those are the 9 that we think are core. So our team we can implement those in for your jurisdiction. We can provide training for how to effectively use those. And like that's something that we do every single day. I think that that's the most effective way because those are extremely robust reports. They're intended to be used in a variety of different ways. And so that training and developing a guide that aligns with your operations is the most important thing that can accompany those reports. I know other jurisdictions have tried to just like turn on the report without that, and we find that they're often just using a small fraction of it or maybe not using it accurately because they didn't realize that they need to have some certain statuses like that in progress status set up for them to effectively use it.
Yeah, while we provide an unlimited custom report service, at the end of the day, those workflows and those processes matter to drive the report. So if you just, copy one of Travis County's reports, but you haven't taken the time to address your policies who's going to really do what, and overall strategy, then you may not end up with the same data. But it's absolutely achievable by every jurisdiction, but you have to do all the steps to make everything really work. Now, Craig, I'm sure the answer to this is yes, but correct me if not. Is someone asked, can we get a copy of these slides for management that could not attend?
Yeah, absolutely. We can either send them out to everybody, or if you want to put them in the portal with the other presentation slides. I'm not sure if y'all are doing that with the other webinars. Like either one.
Okay, so we'll connect with Carolyn after and figure out the best way to get today's slides and presentation out. And it's recorded, so I believe we'll be able to release that as well. Now, Craig, someone asked the million-dollar question: how quickly can an overhaul of our system be implemented?
So I would say you should give yourself 6 months to a year, because there can be a lot of steps, and with every change comes with training for your staff. And so someone could come in and overhaul your entire system, but then your staff is going to be furious and confused and revolt potentially. And so there's an incremental way to introduce all these changes. And with every change should come training guides, training videos, hands-on training with your staff to do it effectively.
All right, Craig, another question. How much of the improvement percentage on step 3 results page are attributed to increased staffing versus process modification? And let me know if you want me to read that again.
Yeah, no, all of this was related to process modification. The only team that hired staff was the engineering team, and that they didn't hire new staff. They were filling in gaps that took them over a year to fill. They had 2 gaps that took a year for them to find qualified engineers to fill. Everybody else, those improvements were made with the staff that was on hand.
Thank you. Next question. How are you capturing partial payments to allow projects to move forward in the queue?
So right now we don't. Like if you haven't paid your full balance, we're not allowing you to continue through the process or start the review process yet. However, if during the review process we find something small, like you didn't tell us that you needed this driveway also, but it's like $40 or something like that, we'll add it to your invoice, send it to you, and continue the review process. But we're not going to let you go to the issue permit process until you've paid that $40, right? We do have another team on the endangered species side where that is a completely different type of permit with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And they actually do the review and send out the invoice, and the invoice sits open indefinitely until you choose to use it, whether you choose tomorrow or you choose like 5 years from now. That's something else that you can customize in it. And so I give you those 2 examples just to explain that there is a way that you can. Honestly, it's probably be like percentage based, like say, hey, this amount is out. If they've paid at least 50% of it, then that indicates to us that they've done the partial payment. We want to start the review. I personally think the best practice is making the zero balance be your standard, just so your staff isn't doing work that they ultimately don't get paid for, which is distracting them from the people that did pay for everything.
Wonderful, thank you. And someone asked that I'll take this question. When will MGO Connect completely replace My Permit Now? So for many customers, that has already taken place. There's many that are already fully using that. But I believe this question is really being asked due to the application acceptance. So if you're in MGO Connect today, if you go to accept an application, it still does utilize part of the old My Permit Now application, puts you right back in MGO Connect. But we actually have completed that, at least the first part of that, and that should be going live this weekend. So
Nice.
we're going to be putting that live this weekend. We're going to try to test it with some smaller jurisdictions, make sure everything's working well. The only jurisdictions that will still need to address something with those that are using the submittal tracking, which isn't many. I know like Louisville and Campbell and a few others are using that big submittal tracking feature. So still need to make one more improvement with that so the acceptance will work, but the vast majority, you're there. So it's just those specialized items. And at this point, if there's something outside of that that you feel is hindering you from fully utilizing MGO Connect, please send me an email and let me know. It's possible it's just some configuration items we need to address, or it's something we may not be aware of. But largely, we have many customers that are fully utilizing it and having great success.
Yeah, and we recently went through that transition to MGO Connect with the permitting team. We've migrated like Public Works directly into MGO Connect, so that was so much easier. But if anyone's going through that process and has questions, like I can feel free to reach out. We're at the tail end of migrating over enforcement, planning, and permitting all into MGO Connect and redoing the configuration that Ryan was talking about, so that we're really utilizing all the new features that are coming with MGO Connect in the most effective way.
All right, I don't know if this will work, but I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna hit the allow mic for attendees. So if someone wants to speak or ask a question verbally, you should be able to. But if you want to go ahead and put another question in the chat, I should be able to read that and help as well. Hey, Trina, if you want to just forward that to me, or I'll just reach out to you and we'll get a meeting scheduled for that. I'll just shoot you an email. All right, any other questions from anyone? All right, I see Diane, will you approach us to migrate our System Connect, or do we need to ask for it? So great question. We have been reaching out as we can. Obviously, we couldn't just switch everybody over all at one time. There would just really be no great way to do that. But we have been reaching out to people. But if you're ready to try it, you certainly are able to just do so. Just simply log in. If you have trouble, reach out to us. We can schedule a meeting and we can go through it together. In the meantime, those who have been reaching out, we're kind of taking care of them first. If you're a person who hasn't been in a hurry, we've been leaving you alone just so we can get the queue churned out. And but before we would ever go to turn anything off, we would absolutely reach out to you. Does anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
So Katie raised her hand. I'm not sure if she still has a question.
Okay, I don't know if you can unmute and speak, if that's working or not. We may have to test that out some more. But if not, just type it in the chat. So in the meantime, I see Kim is asking, when will the switch be required? We don't have a hard date on that, and I'm intentionally not setting one. What we're doing is just working with customers to switch over as you're ready, so there's no pressure. Certainly, the big one, if you're still using the old Inspection Anywhere, we are actively asking all customers to migrate over. For My Permit Now, certainly going to be supported through the rest of the year and into next year. But we're really just hoping that we can have everybody moved over voluntarily, and we never had to set a date. So that's really what our goal is and how we're working towards it. And we're having a lot of success with that. So that's kind of what my plan is. All right, I see Katie posted. Craig, do you know if your services are covered by the HUD grant for permitting?
I am not sure, but we are currently working with a jurisdiction that is paying for our services through a grant. And so I'm not 100% sure I believe it is the HUD grant actually though. But if you reach out to me directly, we can look more into that, and maybe we can talk to that jurisdiction to see how they went about doing that.
All right, and just if anybody's wondering about the HUD grant, that did close yesterday, but there was a grant that was put out for HUD. Its primary focus was to modernize software, with the big focus being for AI plan checks. So that was the big focus, which we do have options for. I know some of our customers did put in for that. So that's something we can help. I'm kind of being told by someone they think there would be more opportunities for similar grants in the future. We have put together templates for those grants. So if they come out again, reach out to us and we can work together to put in. But with the modernization with AI, we have lots of tools. We'll be talking about it, lots of that at the conference, and we can work together. Kelly, how to find out about the grants? I'm really not a grants expert. I just saw it on LinkedIn. That's how I found about it, and about 10 customers emailed it to me. But I believe you can go to the HUD website. Also, a lot of jurisdictions have applied for these HUD grants all the time. So you likely have someone at the city that's very familiar and can keep you aware of it. Kelly, we'll tell you more about that submittal tracking feature in the next meeting. It's a little bit intensive. We do have a new version coming out with it with MGO Connect that'll be more automated. So we'll talk more about that at that time. And are there any guidance documents, training videos for the inspectors that are being asked to migrate away from inspection anywhere? Absolutely. So if they're still doing it, what I recommend is let's schedule a meeting with the inspectors where we can do a live demo and show them and answer questions. And with that, we do have a guide we can follow up with step by step. So we don't want them to feel like they just had the rug pulled out and they have to do something new. We're here to work with them and help them make it a smooth transition. But please let us know. Happy to help with that. And we do have materials. All right. If I have not answered your question, please repost it. I apologize. I just missed it. Anybody else? All right, Craig, do you have any other final comments?
No, I was just really excited to be here. So thank you, Ryan, for letting me present this. And if anybody has any questions, please reach out at my email or LinkedIn that I have here. And I'm happy to talk through anything that maybe you're having challenges with, or maybe even stuff that y'all have done that has worked really well. I'd love to learn about those as well. So please reach out anytime.
Wonderful. Look, everybody, I want to thank you so much for joining today. We're really working hard to do more and more meetings like this and opportunities for engagement. We've developed a lot of really great relationships with partners like Craig and Frontline and others. And we're really working through things like this to put different options. There's more than one way to go about solving a problem. And while all of them may work, sometimes there's a best way for your organization. So we're just trying to get information so you can find what's best for you so that we can continue to advance together year after year. But if you haven't registered for our conference yet, please do. We're going to have tremendous information. We're going to have 2 floors this year. We're going to have lots of breakout sessions. We're going to have tons of CEU opportunities for AI, live.mgoconnect.org. So if anybody else still has a question, Craig and I will hang out for another couple of minutes. The rest of you are free to go. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Jake. All right, Craig, I think we're good to end the presentation.
All right, sounds great. Thank you. Have a good one.